Captain Elias Thorne gripped the armrest as the shuttle lurched, alarms blaring like wounded beasts. "Evasive maneuvers now," he barked, eyes locked on the view screen where the Council's enforcer ships swarmed like angry hornets. His co-pilot, Lena Voss, fingers flying over the controls, banked hard left, the inertial dampeners whining in protest. They were outnumbered 3-1, the alien vessel's plasma lances already scoring the hull with near misses. "They're locking on," Lena said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. She was the cautious one, always double-checking trajectories, but today caution meant survival. Elias nodded, his mind racing through options. The Council had ambushed them mid-diplomatic run, accusing humanity of sabotage on the neutral station. Lies. All of it. Elias knew the real threat was their growing influence, the way human tech was outpacing the galaxy's old guard. A jolt rocked the shuttle. Shields flickered red. "Hull breach in Sector 4, the AI intoned, calm as ever. Elias unstrapped, grabbing his toolkit. "Keep us flying, Lena. I'll seal it." He dashed down the corridor, sparks flying from exposed panels, the air thick with ozone. Brave didn't cover it, he was stubborn, the kind who fixed what others deemed broken. Behind him, the comms crackled. "Human vessel, stand down or be destroyed," came the modulated voice of the Vexari commander, all synthetic politeness masking the threat. Elias ignored it, prying open a conduit. Wires hissed, but he jury-rigged a patch, hands steady from years sealing worse on colony outposts. Lena's voice cut through his helmet feed. "They're closing the net. We can't outrun them forever." Elias sealed the breach, the hiss fading to a low hum. "Then we don't run. Plot a course for the asteroid field, let the rocks do the work." It was a gamble. The field's dense, unpredictable, but humans thrived on improvisation. The shuttle dove into the debris, chunks of ancient rock tumbling like dice in a cosmic game. Enforcers followed, but one clipped a boulder, engines flaring out in a silent explosion. Elias returned to the cockpit, strapping in as Lena wove through the chaos. "Good call," she muttered, a rare grin cracking her focus. But the Vexari adapted fast, tractor beams latching on despite the interference. The shuttle shuddered, pulled toward the lead ship. "They're boarding," Elias said, grabbing his sidearm. Stakes just got personal. Lose the shuttle and the colony's last envoy to the Council vanishes. He and Lena exchanged a look, fight or die trying. Alarms peaked as the airlock cycled. Elias positioned behind the hatch, Lena covering from the console. The door blew and armored figures poured in, tall insectoid Vexari, mandibles clicking. "Surrender, primitives," their leader hissed through a translator. Elias fired first, a precise shot dropping the front rank. "Not our style." Lena joined in, her aim cautious but true, picking off flanks. The corridor became a frenzy of bolts and chitin cracks, the air acrid with discharge. One Vexari lunged at Elias, claws raking his suit. He rolled, slamming his rifle butt into its joint, hearing the snap. They pushed back, but numbers told. Lena took a glancing hit, staggering with a burned arm. "Elias, the core," she gasped, nodding to the engineering panel. "Improvise, always." He dove for it, overriding safeties while dodging fire. A pulse from the jury-rigged system surged, EMP-like, frying the boarders' suits. They convulsed, collapsing in heaps. Silence fell, broken only by Lena's ragged breaths. Elias helped her up, the shuttle free now, enforcers retreating in confusion. But the damage was done, shields down, engines limping. "Council won't forget this," he said, plotting a blind jump to human space. As the stars streaked, Elias glanced at the fading distress beacon. Civility had cracked. The real war was just beginning. The shuttle shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, engines groaning like a wounded beast. Elias gripped the console, eyes scanning the readouts. Human space finally, but the nearest outpost was a ghost signal, faint and flickering. Lena slumped in the co-pilot seat, her burned arm wrapped in a hasty field dressing, the acrid smell of singed fabric hanging in the air. "Status?" she murmured, voice tight with pain. "Shields at 12%. Engines holding, but we're leaking coolant. That jump bought us time, not safety." Elias punched in coordinates for Epsilon Station, the closest hub, a ragtag colony of miners and traders who'd never bent to council edicts. His fingers hesitated over the comms. Broadcasting their position now could summon friends or council hunters. A proximity alert blared, red lights pulsing across the dash. Not enforcers. Debris field ahead, tumbling wreckage from what looked like a freighter, its hull scored by plasma burns. Elias banked hard, the shuttle skimming chunks of twisted metal. What the hell happened here? Lena leaned forward, wincing as she magnified the scan. Looks like an ambush. Human signature on the debris, our people. Her jaw set, the cautious edge in her voice sharpening to resolve. We can't just fly by. Survivors? Elias swore under his breath, weighing the risk. The council had been pushing borders for months, enforcing civility with blockades and inspections that turned bloody fast. Ignoring this meant leaving kin to void freeze. Stopping meant exposing their battered shuttle. Prep the airlock. I'll suit up. He sealed the helmet, the hiss of his breather unit a steady rhythm against his pounding heart. The shuttle matched velocity with a drifting escape pod, its beacon weak but insistent. Grapples extended, locking on with a metallic clang that vibrated through the deck. Elias cycled the airlock, stepping into the pod's dim interior. Two figures huddled inside, frost rimming their suits. A man and a woman, faces pale under the emergency lights. Name's Harlan, the man rasped, helping his partner to her feet. This is Mira. Council hit our convoy an hour ago. Said we violated trade protocols. Took the cargo, left us for scrap. Elias helped them aboard, the airlock cycling shut behind. Back in the cabin, Lena ran med scans while he stowed their gear. Harlan's eyes narrowed at the shuttle's damage. You two look like you've seen the same party. Enforcers? Worse, Lena said, injecting a painkiller into Mira's thigh. We hit back, but they're not stopping. Mira coughed, clearing her throat. They mentioned a new directive. Something about restructuring human assets. Whole sectors going dark. If you're heading to Epsilon, warn them. Council's mobilizing fleets. The words landed like a gut punch. Elias throttled up, the shuttle weaving through the debris toward the station's approach vector. Epsilon wasn't fortified. It was a bolt hole, a place where humans scraped by with grit and jury-rigged fixes. If the Council was coming hard, it wouldn't hold. Alarms wailed again, 3 blips on the long-range scan, closing fast. Enforcer scouts, sleek and predatory, their signatures unmistakable. They tracked us, Elias growled, slamming the engines to full. The shuttle lurched, coolant hissing from a ruptured line. Harlan strapped in, pulling a compact pulse rifle from his pack. I've got your back. Meet up, butches. She nodded, already at the engineering station, fingers flying over exposed wiring. Rerouting power to thrusters. It'll fry secondaries, but we might outrun them. Lena met Elias's gaze, her wit flashing through the pain. Or we turn and bite. Your call, Captain. He glanced at the scopes. The scouts were gaining, weapons hot. No running forever. Bite it is. Harlan, man the turret. Mira, give us a surge. Lena, plot an evasion, weave through the rings. The shuttle dove toward Epsilon's asteroid belt, a jagged maze of rock and ice. Harlan's turret spat fire. A lucky shot shearing off one scout's wing. It spun wildly, exploding in a bloom of plasma. The other two pressed closer, lancing shots that clipped the hull, sparks erupting in the cabin. Mira yelled over the din, "Surge ready, brace!" Elias yanked the yoke, the shuttle bucking as improvised boosters fired. They shot into the rings, debris pinging off the shields like hail. One scout followed too close, smashing into a boulder and crumpling. The last broke off, retreating toward open space. Silence returned, broken by the whine of failing systems. They limped into Epsilon's dock, the station's lights a hazy welcome. Harlan clapped Elias on the shoulder. That was some flying. Humans stick together, right? Elias nodded, but his eyes lingered on the scopes. The Council's retreat felt temporary. As the ramp lowered, the weight of it settled. Civility was a thin veil, and they'd just torn it wider. Elias stepped off the ramp, the metallic tang of coolant and ozone clinging to his flight suit. Epsilon Station's docking bay hummed with activity. Dock workers in grease-smeared coveralls hauling crates, automated drones zipping overhead like metallic insects. But the usual bustle felt off, quieter than it should after a skirmish that close to the rings. Mira trailed behind, her tablet clutched tight, fingers already dancing across the screen to log the shuttle's damage. Hull integrity at 60%, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. We'll need a full refit if we're running patrols again soon. Harlan lingered at the rear, scanning the bay with the wary eyes of a man who'd seen too many ambushes. His hand rested casually on the grip of his sidearm, a habit from the old frontier runs. Council ships pulling back doesn't mean they're done. They'll regroup, hit us where it hurts. Elias nodded, forcing his gaze ahead to the command deck's access tube. The station's core was a warren of pipes and glowing conduits, lit by the soft blue of emergency strips. They moved as a unit, boots echoing in sync, the weight of unspoken questions pressing down. Why the scouts? Why now, when the armistice was barely holding? A klaxon blared from the overhead speakers as they reached the tube's hatch. All personnel to stations. Unidentified contacts approaching Vector 7. Repeat, prepare for intercept. Mira's tablet pinged in response, her face paling under the harsh light. That's our sector. They're coming straight for Epsilon. Elias slammed the hatch release, the group piling into the narrow lift that shot them toward the bridge. The ride was a blur of accelerating forces, gravity tugging unevenly as the station oriented for defense. Harlan braced against the wall, his voice low and steady. We can't fight a full squadron with what we've got. Not after that chase. The lift doors hissed open onto chaos. The bridge was a compact nerve center, screens flickering with tactical overlays, officers barking coordinates. Captain Reza, a wiry veteran with scars mapping her jawline, turned from the central hollow table. Her eyes locked on Elias first. You three, perfect timing. Scouts report 3 Council corvettes inbound, weapons hot. They're ignoring hails. Elias crossed to the table, the hologram projecting jagged vectors slicing toward the station's position. The rings of Epsilon loomed. In the display, a glittering barrier that had saved them once but wouldn't twice. Our shuttle's fried, but we can scramble the wing. I've got a fix for the debris field, use it as a slingshot. Reza's brow furrowed, but she didn't dismiss it outright. Talk fast, we've got minutes. He pointed to the hologram, tracing a tight arc through the denser ring clusters. The boulders aren't random. There's a gravitational eddy here, pulls anything too fast into a spin. We lure them in, feather our engines to skirt it, and watch them tangle. Mira leaned in, pulling up shuttle logs on a secondary screen. Risky. One miscalculation and we're the ones scraping hulls off rocks. Harlan grunted approval, cracking his knuckles. Better than sitting here as target practice. I'll co-pilot. You fly, Elias. We thread the needle. Reza waited for a beat, the klaxons underscoring the urgency. Approved. Gear up, and take Lena from engineering. She knows those eddies like her own blood. They bolted from the bridge, the station's corridors narrowing as they sprinted toward the auxiliary hangars. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Lena met them at the hatch, toolkit slung over her shoulder, her cautious nature evident in the precise way she checked seals on a borrowed fighter. Heard the plan. Insane, but I've mapped those flows. Just don't push the thrust past 80% on the exit. The fighter's cockpit was a snug fit for 4, harnesses snapping into place amid the whine of pre-flight checks. Elias gripped the controls, the engines rumbling to life beneath them. Through the canopy, the docking bay doors irised open, revealing the starry void pierced by the ring's ethereal glow. Contacts closing, Mira reported from the nav seat, her voice clipped. 2 minutes to engagement range. Elias punched the throttle, the fighter leaping free. The rings filled their view, a majestic storm of ice and stone tumbling in lazy orbits. He banked hard, dipping toward the outer edge, broadcasting on open channel. Council vessels, this is Epsilon Patrol. Stand down or follow at your peril. Static crackled back, then a synthesized voice, cold and authoritative. Human interlopers, your incursion ends here. Surrender the station. Not today, Elias murmured, keying the squadron channel. Wing, form up on me. We dance. The corvettes appeared on scopes like predators uncoiling, sleek and angular, their prows glowing with charged emitters. They accelerated, firing warning lances that streaked past, vaporizing a stray boulder in a flash of superheated gas. Elias wove through the fringes, the fighter shuddering as debris pinged off the shields. Now! Into the eddy! Lena called out adjustments, her voice a calm anchor. Ease left 5 degrees. Currents pulling hard. The lead corvette mimicked their path, overconfident in its superior mass. It plunged deeper, engines flaring blue. For a moment it held, then the gravitational twist caught it, hull groaning as it yawed wildly, slamming into a cluster of rocks. Shards exploded outward, one grazing Harlan's wingtip with a screech of metal. "Direct hit!" Mira whooped, but tension laced her words. The second corvette adjusted braking formation to flank them. Elias rolled inverted, firing retros to slingshot around a massive ice fragment. The maneuver bought seconds, but the flanking ship loosed a barrage, beams carving molten trails across the ice. Harlan's shuttle bucked, alarms blaring as the shields flickered under the onslaught. He gripped the controls, sweat beading on his forehead, and yanked the stick hard right. The ship responded with a reluctant groan, veering just enough to let the worst of the barrage slice past. "Shields at 40%, Lena shouted from the nav console, her fingers flying over the holographic displays. "We can't take another volley like that." Elias, strapped into the co-pilot seat, scanned the tactical overlay. The flanking corvette was closing fast, its sleek alien design cutting through the debris field like a predator through tall grass. "Options? We can't outrun them in this soup." Mira twisted in her gunner's harness, her eyes narrowed on the targeting reticule. "Give me a clear shot. I'll make 'em regret that fancy paint job." Harlan didn't hesitate. The eddy's chaos was their only edge. A swirling maelstrom of gravitational pulls from the shattered asteroid belt, where the Council's ships relied on precise calculations and overwhelming power. Humans. They improvised. "Lena, plot a dive through that fracture line, the one with the plasma vents." She glanced up, her cautious nature flashing in her wide eyes, but she nodded. Brave under fire, that's what kept her alive this long. "It's suicide. The vents could fry us." "Better than capture?" Harlan growled, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. He'd seen what the Council did to recalcitrant crews, mind-wiped and repurposed as labor drones. No way his team ended up like that. The shuttle plunged, engines whining as they threaded the needle between jagged ice boulders. The flanking corvette followed, its beams lancing out again, but the debris scattered the shots, turning lethal precision into wild sprays of energy. Mira fired back, her turret swiveling with a mechanical hiss. A lucky plasma bolt from their forward guns clipped the enemy's dorsal fin, sending sparks cascading across its hull. "Hit!" "But they're not slowing," Mira reported, frustration edging her wit. "These bastards are glued to us." Elias leaned forward, studying the vent cluster ahead, a ragged scar in the asteroid where geothermal fury bubbled up from the system's core. "Harlan, if we skim the vents, we might destabilize their stabilizers. Their tech's too clean. It'll overload." Harlan's mind raced, piecing it together. Human ships were built tough, cobbled from salvage and ingenuity, not the Council's sterile perfection. "Do it, Mira, cover our tail." "Elias, reroute auxiliary power to the shields. Make 'em count." The shuttle dove into the fracture, heat shields glowing cherry red as they brushed the plasma plumes. Alarms screamed, the cabin filling with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Harlan felt the pull, like gravity itself trying to rip them apart, but he held the course, muscles taut against the G-forces. Behind them, the corvette hesitated for a split second, its AI calculating risks, protocols demanding retreat. But pride or orders pushed it forward. It surged into the vents, energy fields shimmering as plasma licked at its hull. Then it happened. The corvette's stabilizers faltered, blue arcs of overload dancing along its frame. It yawed sharply, slamming into a protruding spire of rock. The explosion was muffled by the vacuum, but the flash lit up the eddy like a newborn star, debris blooming outward in a deadly cloud. Harlan pulled up hard, the shuttle shuddering as shrapnel pinged off their reinforced plating. "We're clear. Lena, get us out of here." She punched in the escape vector, her hand steady now, the caution giving way to quiet resolve. "Eddy exit in 30 seconds. But engines are straining. We might limp to the relay point." Mira slumped back, wiping sweat from her brow. "One down, one to go. That lead ship's probably calling for backup by now." Elias checked the long-range scanners, his witty edge surfacing in a grim chuckle. "Let 'em come. We've got the home field advantage in this mess." The shuttle burst from the eddy's grip, stars wheeling into focus as they entered open space. But the victory felt hollow. The earlier graze on Harlan's wingtip had compromised their integrity, and fuel reserves blinked critically low. The Council's pursuit wasn't over. It was just getting started. Harlan set his jaw, eyes fixed on the distant nebula that promised cover. They'd adapt, as always, or die trying. Harlan throttled the engines harder, the shuttle groaning as it dove toward the nebula's swirling edge. Purple tendrils of gas clawed at the viewport, distorting the stars into smears of light. "Hold her steady!" he barked, fingers dancing over the controls. The fuel gauge dipped another notch, a relentless red warning. Mira leaned forward, her cautious eyes scanning the tactical display. Scanners show 3 Council interceptors breaking from the eddy, closing fast. "They're vectoring right for us." Her voice stayed level, but her knuckles whitened on the armrest. She'd always been the one to map the risks, the voice urging retreat before the fight turned sour. Elias snorted from the nav station, his witty barbs a shield against the tension. 3, that's optimistic. I count 4 shadows in the interference. Harlan, if we punch into that nebula blind, we're gambling on luck we don't have. The shuttle shuddered as the first wisps of ionized gas buffeted the hull. Harlan felt the vibration through his boots, a reminder of the graze that had cracked their outer plating. Resource shortage was their real enemy now. Oxygen recyclers at 80%, power cells flickering. One wrong burst from the thrusters and they'd be adrift in the cosmic soup. "Options?" Harlan asked, not taking his eyes off the approach. The nebula loomed larger, a graveyard of stellar debris that could hide them or shred them apart. Mira tapped her console, pulling up sims. "Skim the outer layer, use the density gradients for deflection, but it'll stress the shields. If they fire disruptors—" She trailed off, the cost implicit. A hull breach, suits on, suffocating silence. Elias grinned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Or we improvise. Remember that old freighter trick from the academy? Dump the auxiliary coolant, it'll ionize and throw a false signature. Buy us a ghost trail." Harlan waited. The coolant was precious, meant for emergencies far less dire than this. But the interceptor's signatures sharpened on the screen, their formation tightening like a noose. "Do it, Mira, plot the skim path. Make it tight." She nodded, her fingers flying. Path locked. 3 minutes to entry. Elias, vent on my mark. The shuttle banked sharply, engines whining as they skirted the nebula's fringe. Alarms blared. Proximity alerts as the lead interceptor loosed a probing shot. The beam glanced off their aft shields, sparking blue fire across the sensors. "Mark!" Mira called. Elias hit the release. Coolant spewed out in a calculated plume, mixing with the gas clouds to birth a shimmering decoy. On the display, a duplicate shuttle signature bloomed, drawing the Council's fire. Bolts lanced toward the ghost, illuminating the nebula in staccato flashes. Harlan pushed the nose down, threading into the denser fog. Visibility dropped to 0. Only Mira's nav overlays guided them, holographic lines pulsing in the dim cockpit. The hull creaked under the pressure, microfractures spiderwebbing the integrity readouts. "They're splitting pursuit," Elias reported, voice tight. 2 on the decoy, but the others are adapting, scanning for heat blooms. Sweat beaded on Harlan's forehead. The plan had bought time, but the nebula's hazards were closing in. A rogue asteroid fragment pinged the dorsal fin, jarring them sideways. Mira cursed softly, adjusting course. "We're bleeding power. Shields at 40%. Harlan's mind raced, human grit kicking in where tech failed. The Council ships were sleek, optimized for open void chases, not this chaotic soup. They had the edge in raw endurance, or they would if he could turn it. Elias reroute auxiliary power to the maneuvering thrusters. Short bursts only. "We'll slingshot off that gas pocket ahead." Elias paused, then chuckled grimly. "Crazy enough to work." "Routing now." The maneuver hit like a gut punch. Harlan fired the thrusters in staccato rhythm, using the nebula's turbulent currents to whip them around an invisible eddy. G-forces pinned them to their seats, the world blurring. Mira gripped the console, her cautious nature warring with the necessity. If we miscalculate, we're paced. One interceptor broke through the interference, its silhouette materializing like a predator from the mist. Disruptors charged, humming threat. Harlan rolled the shuttle, barely evading the first volley. The beam scorched their wing, alarms shrieking as systems faltered. "Shields critical," Mira yelled. Elias slammed a panel override. "Compensating, hold on." In that heartbeat, Harlan spotted it. A narrow channel in the gas flows, a fleeting gap born of the nebula's whims. He yanked the yoke, committing to the improvised path. The shuttle surged forward, the channel compressing around them like a vice. The pursuing ship followed, too committed to turn. Then the reversal struck. The channel narrowed fatally for the larger council vessel. It clipped a density wall, engines flaring in protest before erupting in a silent fireball. Debris scattered, a temporary shield in the haze. The other interceptors veered off, signals fracturing in the interference. Harlan eased the throttle, the shuttle limping free of the worst. Fuel reserves hovered at scraps, the hull venting atmosphere in thin wisps. Mira exhaled, slumping. We made it, barely. Elias wiped his brow, quip ready. Next time, let's pick a fight with fewer fireworks. Harlan glanced at the fading glow of their pursuer, the cost etched in every flickering light. The council would regroup, but for now the nebula spat them out into clearer stars. Survival demanded adaptation. Harlan's hands trembled on the controls as the shuttle shuddered into open space, the nebula's swirling gases receding like a bad dream. Alarms blared faintly, a persistent whine from the breached hull, but the stars ahead gleamed sharp and unforgiving. Freedom, or at least a chance at it. He punched in coordinates for the nearest fringe outpost, a dusty rock called Epsilon Drift, where human traders still bartered without council oversight. Fuel gauges flickered red. They'd make it, maybe, if nothing else went wrong. Mira straightened in her seat, her cautious eyes scanning the sensor readouts. Interference is clearing. No tails yet, but that fireball won't stay secret long. Council's got eyes everywhere. She patched a quick seal over the venting panel, her fingers steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. Always the fixer, Mira. Never one to panic, just adapt and endure. Elias leaned back, his witty grin masking the strain. Eyes more like tentacles. But hey, we just turned their fancy armada into space confetti. That's gotta count for something. He rummaged through the medkit, slapping a patch on a gash across his arm from the earlier jolt. Blood seeped through, but he waved off help. Save the supplies. We've got bigger problems than my beauty mark. The shuttle lurched as a micro-debris field pinged off the shields, remnants of their escape. Harlan gritted his teeth, easing through it. The Council's interceptors had been sleek, efficient predators, bred for pursuit in the void. Humans? We built this junker from scavenged parts held together by grit and glue, but it had gotten them this far. Elias rigged the distress beacon to broadcast on human frex only. No council channels. Mira, what's our ETA? 4 hours if we don't hit another snag. Mira replied, her voice level. She traced a route on the nav screen, avoiding patrolled lanes. But Epsilon's neutral ground barely. Last I heard, it's crawling with independents. Smugglers, refugees. We dock quiet, blend in. Elias chuckled, but it came out forced. Blend in, with this sieve leaking air? We'll be the life of the party. He finished the beacon tweak, a low hum confirming it pulsed out their SOS. Human ingenuity disguised as static to any alien scanner. Tension coiled in the cockpit as the first warning light flared. Engines overheating from the nebula's residual plasma. Harlan cursed under his breath, diverting power from non-essentials. Lights dimmed, casting long shadows. We push it too hard back there. Cooling systems fried. Mira unstrapped, grabbing a toolkit. On it. Elias, cover the scopes. She crawled into the access hatch, sparks flying as she jury-rigged the vents. The ship groaned, a beast protesting the strain. Elias's eyes narrowed at the sensors. Got movement, 3 signatures closing from starboard. Not council profiles, but they're fast. Pirates? Or worse, bounty hunters sniffing our trail. Harlan's pulse quickened. Epsilon Drift was a haven for the desperate, but desperation bred opportunists. Hail them, play it neutral. The comm crackled to life. A gravelly voice responded, laced with synthetic distortion. Unidentified shuttle, this is the Drift Warden. State your business or prepare to be boarded. We don't take kindly to council stragglers. Elias keyed the mic, his tone light but edged. Drift Warden, we're just wayward traders with a bum engine. No council ties, promise. Got any docking bays for honest folk? Silence stretched, then a bark of laughter. Honest in this sector? Patch your vector to 279. But if you're lying, we'll space you ourselves. Harlan adjusted course, the shuttle banking smoothly. Mira emerged from the hatch, face smudged with grease. Engine stabilized for now. What's the word? Invitation to the party, Elias said, but his quip lacked punch. The signatures closed in, flanking them like wolves. As Epsilon loomed, a jagged asteroid hive pocked with lights and antenna arrays, Harlan felt the weight settle. They'd evaded the council, but survival here meant new games, new risks. Mira's hand brushed his shoulder, a silent anchor. Elias scanned the docking feeds, spotting armed figures milling below. The shuttle slipped into the bay, clamps engaging with a metallic thud. Harlan powered down, the hum fading to silence. Gear up. We move fast, talk smarter. They stepped out into the acrid air of the outpost, the clang of boots on grated floors echoing their resolve. Shadows shifted in the haze, and Harlan wondered if they'd traded one hunter for a dozen more. But humans didn't break easy, not when the stars still burned bright. Harlan's boot scraped against a loose grate as he led the way down the dim corridor, the air thick with the tang of recycled oxygen and something sharper. Burnt wiring, maybe, or the faint char of plasma scoring. Mira flanked him on the left, her scanner humming softly in her grip, while Elias brought up the rear, his rifle slung low but ready. The outpost's haze clung to their suits like a bad omen, lights flickering overhead in erratic pulses that cast long, jagged shadows across the metal walls. Contact ahead, Mira whispered, her voice cutting through the low drone of distant machinery. She nodded toward a cluster of crates stacked haphazardly at the corridor's bend, where two figures in patched enviro suits huddled over a flickering holopad. They weren't council enforcers, too ragged, too improvised, but that didn't make them friendly. Harlan's pulse quickened. They'd come to Epsilon for salvage, not a firefight. But the asteroid's underbelly was a lawless scrapyard, full of scavengers who'd gut you for a fusion cell. He raised a gloved hand, signaling halt. Elias crouched behind a support beam, his breath steady despite the tension coiling in the air. Two tangos armed light. Drank darts or talk? Elias murmured into the comm, his cautious nature threading the words, always weighing the odds, never charging blind. Harlan waited too, eyes narrowing on the figures. One glanced up, catching the glint of their lights, and froze. Talk first. Bullets echoed too far in these tunnels. Hey, Harlan called out, stepping into view with palms open, the universal sign for not yet hostile. We're not here for trouble, just passing through, looking for a quiet dock. The nearer scavenger, a wiry woman with a scarred visor, straightened, her hand twitching toward a makeshift pistol at her belt. Her partner, bulkier and sporting a jury-rigged exosuit arm, kept the holopad angled away. But Harlan caught a glimpse. Schematics of the outpost's core vents marked with red hazard lines. Resource shortage, then. The kind that turned allies into rivals quick. Quiet, Doc? In Epsilon? She snorted, voice gravelly through her suit's filter. Ain't no such thing, Spacer. Council's got eyes on every bay, and the vents are clogged with debris from that last quake. You blind or just stupid? Mira edged forward, her witty edge slipping in like a blade. Neither. But if your mapping vents sounds like you're as stuck as we are. Share the scan and maybe we trade. Got clean water filters from the shuttle run. It was a gamble. Human grit wrapped in camaraderie. But Harlan saw the flicker in the woman's posture. Desperation cracking the suspicion. The bulkier one grumbled, but the woman waved him down. Filters for the full map? Fine. But if your council plans, I'll vent you myself. She tossed a data chip Mira's way, and as it arced through the haze, Harlan's scanner pinged, a subtle alert, not just a map. Embedded tracker. Before he could warn them, the corridor shuddered. Alarms wailed, red strobes bathing everything in bloody light. The woman cursed, bolting for cover as a section of wall groaned and buckled, spewing dust and sparks. The quake, worse than they'd thought, ripping through the unstable rock of Epsilon like a fault line awakening. Move, Harlan barked, grabbing Mira's arm and yanking her toward a side passage. Elias fired a suppressive burst from his rifle, not at the scavengers but at the crumbling ceiling where chunks of ore threatened to bury them. The pair vanished into the chaos, but not before the woman shouted back, "Trap sprung, run!" They sprinted, the floor tilting underfoot as aftershocks rattled the outpost. Harlan's mind raced. The tracker wasn't just bait. It had triggered something, maybe a rigged charge to collapse the vents and hoard the air recyclers. Resource war, asteroid style. Elias stumbled, his boot catching on a rent plate, and Harlan hauled him up. The three of them weaving through narrowing tunnels where the air grew thinner, acrid with ozone. Mira's scanner lit up ahead. A sealed bulkhead, their only shot to the upper levels. But it was fused, emergency locks engaged from the quake. Can't hack it fast enough, she said, slamming her fist against the controls. Sparks flew, but the door held. Human ingenuity kicked in then, raw and desperate. Harlan eyed the exosuit arm Elias had scavenged earlier from the shuttle bay, hydraulic clamps meant for heavy lifting. Elias, brace it. Mira, on 3, overload the panel. They worked in sync, no words wasted. Elias wedged the arm into the seam, powering it to strain against the metal with a whine. Mira jury-rigged a power surge from her scanner's battery, the bulkhead hissing in protest. The door gave way with a screech, peeling back just as another tremor hit, sending debris cascading behind them. They tumbled through into a wider chamber, the air recyclers humming louder here, a fragile sanctuary. But the cost lingered. Elias's suit was torn at the shoulder, his arm bleeding from shrapnel, and Mira's scanner was fried, leaving them blind to further traps. Harlan sealed the door as best he could, the clang echoing like a final defiance. They weren't out yet, but they'd clawed through the rock once more. Harlan leaned against the chamber wall, his breath ragged in the confines of his helmet. The air recyclers thrummed like a distant heartbeat, pulling in the stale scent of scorched metal and sweat. He glanced at Elias, who cradled his injured arm, blood seeping through the suit's patch job, staining the gray fabric dark. "We can't keep punching through like this," Mira said, her voice steady but edged with fatigue. She knelt by the sealed door, fingers tracing the makeshift weld they'd improvised from a spare panel. "Scanners are toast. We're flying blind and those tremors aren't letting up." Elias grunted, shifting his weight. The big man, always the rock in their trio, winced as he flexed his fingers. "Blind's better than buried. What's the play? Push forward or hole up?" Harlan scanned the chamber. Conduits snaking along the ceiling, a cluster of emergency lockers bolted to the far wall, and a faint glow from what might be a service shaft. No maps, no readouts, just the hum of failing systems. The council station had been a marvel once, a nexus of alien diplomacy where humans bartered tech for peace. Now it was a tomb crumbling under the weight of betrayal. The Krell uprising had hit hard, their bioweapons turning corridors into acid-veined mazes, and the council's vaunted civility had shattered like glass. Forward, Harlan decided, pushing off the wall. His cautious nature itched for a better plan, but hesitation had already cost them jacks in the lower decks. "That shaft looks promising. If we link it to the core overrides, maybe we reroute power to the evac pods." Mira nodded, slinging her useless scanner over her shoulder like a trophy of survival. "Risky. But yeah, Elias, you good to haul?" The engineer straightened, masking the pain with a wry grin visible through his visor. "Born ready. Just don't ask me to juggle while I do it." They moved as a unit, Harlan taking point with his multi-tool extended like a probe. The chamber's floor vibrated subtly, a reminder of the station's slow unraveling. He pried open the first locker. Rations, a medkit, nothing game-changing. But the second yielded a coil of fiber optic cable, its ends frayed but intact. "Jackpot," he muttered. "We can splice this to bypass the locks." Mira snatched it up, her quick mind already mapping connections. "Clever. Run it parallel to the main lines. If the Krell cut the primaries, this'll ghost us through." Elias wedged his good shoulder into the service shaft's mouth, the metal groaning as he forced it wider. Dust motes danced in the beam of his helmet light, revealing a narrow crawl space laced with exposed wiring. "Tight fit. Mira, you're slimmer. Scout ahead?" She hesitated, glancing at Harlan. The witty spark in her eyes dimmed for a beat, replaced by resolve. "On it. Keep the line taut." As she vanished into the dark, Harlan fed the cable after her, his heart pounding against his ribs. The air grew thicker here, laced with an acrid tang that his suit's filters struggled to scrub. Minutes stretched, marked by the scrape of her suit against the walls and terse updates over comms. "Clear so far?" Mira's voice crackled. "Wiring's intact, but there's a junction box up ahead. Looks tampered. Krell sabotage?" "Probably," Elias replied, his tone clipped. He braced the shaft's edge, sweat beading on his brow. "Don't touch it blind. We improvise a probe." Harlan uncoiled a length of the cable, stripping the end with his tool. He fashioned a crude sensor from a shard of the medkit's foil packaging, wrapping it around the tip. "This'll pick up current spikes. Mira, snag it and test." The weight clawed at him. A low rumble built in the walls, the station protesting its wounds. Elias shifted, his injured arm trembling. "Harlan, if she hits trouble..." "She won't." But doubt gnawed. Mira had been the optimist, the one cracking jokes to cut the tension during endless shifts on the frontier outposts. Losing her would gut them. The cable jerked once, twice. "Got it." Mira's voice returned, sharper now. "Box is rigged. Feedback loop that'll fry anything that touches it. But I can shunt it with the cable. Stand by." Sparks flared in the shaft's gloom, visible even from their vantage. Harlan gripped the wall, muscles coiled. The rumble peaked. A section of ceiling panel buckling overhead with a crack like thunder. Debris rained down, pinging off Elias's helmet. "Move," Harlan barked, yanking Elias back as a chunk slammed where he'd stood. Mira's comms hissed static, then cleared. "Shunts holding, but the loop's pulling power, lights flickering. We got maybe 5 minutes before it cascades." Elias hauled himself up, face grim. "Then we don't waste him." Harlan, splice the main line now. They worked frantically, Harlan's hands steady despite the adrenaline surge. He threaded the cable into the chamber's access port, twisting connections with practiced grit. Sparks flew, but the jury rig held, a faint green pulse confirming the bypass. "Pods are online," Mira called from the shaft. "But the path's collapsing behind me. Hurry!" Harlan sealed the port, the chamber's light steadying for the first time. Relief washed through him, bitter with the knowledge of what they'd lost. Time, gear, blood. Elias clapped his good hand on Harlan's shoulder, a silent nod of camaraderie forged in the fire of necessity. They plunged into the shaft after her, the station's death throes echoing in their wake. Survival wasn't pretty, but it was theirs. Human, unyielding, one clever fix at a time. Harlan's boot scraped against the ladder's rungs as the shaft buckled inward, metal groaning like a beast in its final breath. Mira was ahead, her flashlight beam slicing through the dust-choked air, illuminating jagged tears in the walls where conduits had burst. "Keep moving. Structural integrity's at 20%, she shouted back, her voice tight but steady, the cautious edge she'd always carried now sharpened by the chase. Elias grunted behind Harlan, his bandaged arms slung across his chest to avoid the jolts. The makeshift splint held, but sweat beaded on his forehead, mixing with the grime. "That bypass bought us minutes, not hours. If the Council's drones catch our trail..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang. No need for elaboration. The alien enforcers had sealed the outer decks, their sleek probes hunting for signs of the breach. One wrong turn and those silent hunters would turn the shaft into a tomb. They dropped into a lateral corridor, the floor tilting at a precarious angle. Harlan caught Mira's elbow as she stumbled, pulling her upright. The air hummed with failing power relays, sparks dancing along the ceiling like fireflies in a storm. "We need the auxiliary bay," Harlan said, his mind racing through the station's schematics. "It's our shot at the emergency pods." But the direct route's mined, council traps. Mira nodded, wiping soot from her eyes, her wit flashing even now. "Mind? Great. Because who needs a straight path when you can play human pinball?" She scanned the junction ahead where 3 paths diverged. One glowing faintly with emergency lights, the other shrouded in shadow. Elias leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Take the shadows. Drones follow the power signatures." They veered left into the dim underbelly of the station. The corridor narrowed, forcing them single file, Harlan in the lead with his multi-tool gripped like a weapon. Footsteps echoed too loudly in the confined space, each one a potential giveaway. A low vibration built underfoot, another collapse rippling through the structure. Mira cursed softly as a panel overhead hissed steam, scalding her shoulder. She batted it away, skin reddening but her pace unbroken, hot enough to cook but not stop us. The air grew thicker, laced with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Harlan's light caught something ahead, a sealed bulkhead, its control panel fried, wires dangling like exposed nerves. "Dead end," Elias muttered, frustration cracking his usual calm. But Harlan knelt, prying at the edges with his tool. Not dead, just stubborn. He stripped a wire, jury-rigging a bypass from scavenged parts, a trick from old colony runs where machines didn't yield easy. Sparks flew, but the door groaned open, revealing the auxiliary bay beyond. They spilled inside, the chamber a cavern of shadows and flickering consoles. Pods lined the walls, 3 of them intact, their hatches sealed against the chaos. Mira dashed to the nearest, punching in overrides. "Pods primed, but the launch sequence needs manual sync." Councils jammed the automatics. Elias slumped against a pod, his good hand clutching his side. "Do it quick." "I hear them! Drones!" The hum grew to a whine outside the bay doors, mechanical whirs cutting through the din. Harlan joined Mira at the console, his fingers flying over the keys. Link the power from the failing grid, redirect it here. It was risky. One surge could fry the pods entirely, but as the first drone's probe breached the outer seal, slicing through with laser precision, they had no choice. The console lit up, green indicators blooming like fragile hope. Mira sealed the first pod, shoving Elias inside despite his protest. You're piloting, you're the steadiest hand we've got. He argued for a second, eyes fierce, but nodded and strapped in. Harlan hit the sync, the bay shuddering as the launch rails engaged. The drone burst through, its optics scanning the room, but the pods fired in sequence. Mira's next, then Harlan's trailing. They rocketed free, the station fracturing behind them in a bloom of fire and debris. Harlan gripped the controls, the void stretching endless ahead. Elias's voice crackled over comms from the lead pod. Council's fleet is closing, but we're out. For now. The stars wheeled, cold and indifferent, but their trajectory held true, human stubbornness charting the escape. Harlan's fingers danced over the makeshift console, rerouting power from the pod's failing life support to the thrusters. The stars blurred into streaks as he pushed the engines harder, Elias's lead pod a faint blip ahead on the scanner. Mira's voice cut through the static, sharp and unyielding. Fleet's got us locked, 3 cruisers vectoring in. We can't outrun them forever. Elias responded first, his tone clipped. The pilot's calm masking the edge. Divert to the nebula fringe. It'll scramble their sensors. Harlan, sync your nav with mine. Tight formation or we'll lose visual. Harlan nodded to himself, sweat beading on his brow despite the dropping temperature. The pod groaned, metal protesting the strain, but he patched the link. Mira's pod slotted in behind, a ragged triangle slicing through the void. The nebula loomed on the scopes, a swirling wall of gas and dust that hid more than it revealed. Perfect cover if they made it. Alarms blared as the first council beam lanced past, close enough to rattle Harlan's teeth. They're firing blind, he muttered, twisting the controls to weave through a debris field. Chunks of the shattered station tumbled around them, silent hazards in the black. Elias whooped over comms, a rare crack in his steady demeanor. That's it. Use the junk as a shield. Mira, your pod's got the widest profile. Angle left and draw fire. She didn't hesitate. On it. Just don't leave me hanging. Her pod banked sharply, engines flaring blue against the dark, pulling the pursuer's attention. Harlan glimpsed the exchange on his tiny display. Energy bolts stitching the void, one grazing Mira's hull in a shower of sparks. His gut twisted. They were humans, stubborn, yes, but not invincible. One hit too solid and she'd be vapor. The nebula's edge swallowed them first, tendrils of ionized gas whipping across the viewport like ethereal flames. Sensors fritzed, the scanner dissolving into noise. Harlan's heart pounded in rhythm with the pod's hum. Lost them? He asked, voice low. Elias's reply came strained. For a minute. But they're adaptive, those bastards learn fast. We need a play. Static swallowed the channel briefly, then Mira broke in, breathless. My auxiliary tank's leaking. Oxygen's at 40%. If we hole up here, I'm done first. Harlan scanned the readouts, mind racing. The nebula wasn't just cover. It was a graveyard of old wrecks, human relics from forgotten wars. An idea sparked, reckless but theirs. The derelict cluster dead ahead. Elias, you remember that salvage run? The old freighter with the EMP coil? A pause, then Elias's voice lit with grim approval. Yeah, if it's intact, we could overload it. Fry their systems without touching ours. Harlan felt the camaraderie solidify, a thread binding them across the cold miles. No speeches, just the shared grit of survival. Mira chimed in, urgency threading her words. Guide me in. I'll rig the charges if we board. Harlan plotted the course, the pod shuddering as they dove deeper into the haze. Ghostly silhouettes emerged, rusted hulls, silent sentinels. The council cruisers ghosted on the edge of detection, closing like predators scenting blood. They matched velocities with the freighter, a behemoth twice their size, its bays yawning open. Harlan sealed his suit, the air turning stale as he cracked the hatch. Magnetic boots clamped to the hull, he pulled himself toward the access point, tools clipped to his belt. Mira was already there, her figure a shadow against the flickering lights of her pod. Coils in the engine room, she said, prying at the sealed door. Harlan, cover me. Scanners show movement. He wedged his pry bar in, muscles burning, the door giving with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Inside the wreck was a tomb, wires dangling like vines, panels gutted by time. Elias's voice urged them on. Fleets breaking through the interference, 2 minutes tops. They scrambled through corridors, flashlights cutting the gloom. Mira reached the coil first, a massive cylinder humming faintly on residual power. This'll work, she said, fingers flying over the controls. Harlan jury-rigged a bypass drawing from their pod batteries, human ingenuity at its rawest, turning scraps into salvation. The first council drone breached the nebula, its scan beams piercing the gas like accusatory fingers. Harlan slammed the initiator home. The coil whined, building charge. Elias, pull back now. Pods detached in unison, rocketing clear as the freighter erupted in a silent pulse of electromagnetic fury. The nebula lit from within, a shockwave rippling outward. Council ships stuttered, lights flickering, engines stalling in the overload. Harlan exhaled, watching the cruisers drift helpless. Mira's pod limped beside his, scarred but whole. Elias led the way out, voice steady. Clear path. But they've got reinforcements inbound. They punched toward open space, the cost etched in their dwindling reserves. Humanity's fire burned on, unquenched. Harlan gripped the pod's controls, the viewport framing the nebula's fading glow like a bruise on the void. Alarms chirped softly, tallying the damage. Life support strained at 80%, fuel cells dipping into the red. Mira's voice crackled over the comm, sharp but steady. Harlan, we've got 6 signatures closing fast, Council interceptors light and mean. They'll cut us off before we hit the relay point. Elias's pod flanked them, thrusters flaring in precise bursts to maintain formation. Options? We can't outrun them clean, not with these scraps. His tone carried that old spacer grit, the kind that turned desperation into diagrams. Harlan scanned the readouts, fingers dancing across the jury-rigged panel. The freighter's sacrifice had bought them time, but the nebula's interference lingered, scrambling long-range sensors. A glint caught his eye. Debris field from the overload, tumbling chunks of hull and conduit. We don't run, we hide. Elias, plot a vector into that wreckage. Mira, sync your pod's emitters to mine. We'll spoof a distress beacon, draw the lead pair in close. Mira's laugh was brief, edged with adrenaline. Baiting the bugs? Risky, but I've got your back. Her pod adjusted, a faint hum building as she linked systems. Harlan felt the vibration through his seat. The old coil from the freighter repurposed into their evasion net. It wasn't much, a patchwork of human engineering against the Council's sleek precision. But it was theirs. The interceptors sliced into view, angular shadows against the stars, their scan pulses sweeping like predator eyes. Harlan punched the throttle, diving the pod into the debris cloud. Metal fragments pinged off the hull, a staccato rhythm that set his teeth on edge. Hold formation, 3, 2, beacon live. The fake signal bloomed, a desperate wail mimicking a crippled civilian hauler. The lead interceptors veered, engines glowing hotter as they zeroed in. Elias's voice cut through the static. They're biting. But the trailing 4 are fanning out, search pattern. We've got maybe 90 seconds before they wise up. Harlan wove through a spinning girder, the pod groaning under G-forces. Sweat beaded on his brow, the cabin's air growing thick. Mira's pod brushed his, a near miss that sparked warning lights. Too tight. Harlan, adjust port. A jolt rocked them. Harlan's pod shuddered, proximity alarms blaring. One interceptor had slipped the bait, its beam locking on. Evasive. Elias, cover fire if you can spare the juice. Elias's pod twisted, launching a scatter of micro-drones, salvaged from the freighter's cargo, reprogrammed on the fly. They detonated in a web of interference, buying Harlan a heartbeat. He rolled hard, the viewport blurring with debris. The interceptor fired, a lance of plasma grazing the pod's flank. Heat bloomed inside, panels sparking. Harlan! Mira's cry was raw, her pod surging to shield him. She unleashed a pulse from the linked emitters, a crude EMP ripple that made the interceptor stutter. Its weapons went dark, but the strain showed. Mira's voice strained. Systems flickering. That took more than I had. The lead pair, tangled in the beacon's illusion, collided with a debris cluster. Explosions lit the field, silent blooms of fire that scattered the hunt. But the remaining 4 closed ranks relentless. Harlan's mind raced, piecing the puzzle. The nebula's edge was near, its magnetic storms a gamble. Into the gas! It'll scramble their locks. Elias, lead. We'll follow your tail. Elias didn't hesitate. On me. Punch it. His pod arrowed forward, cutting into the nebula's hazy fringe. Harlan and Mira fell in, the gas enveloping them like cold fog. Sensors haywired, displays glitching with false echoes. Behind, the interceptors hesitated, their formations breaking as the interference clawed at their systems. A direct hit clipped Mira's pod, sending it spinning. Harlan banked hard, extending a tether line from his docking port, a hasty weld from their escape prep. Grab hold. I've got you. The line snagged, pulling her back into sync. Her breathing came heavy over the comm. Thanks, but we're leaking atmo now. Can't sustain this long. The stakes twisted tighter. Reserves plummeted, the nebula sapping what little power they had left. Elias's voice broke through. Relay point in sight, but they've adapted. Two breaking through the gas behind us. Harlan's jaw set. No more running blind. He keyed the console, rerouting everything, life support, nav, even auxiliary lights, into one final improvisation. The pod's outer hull, scarred from the freighter blast, still held residual charge. Overload the skin. Turn us into ghosts, he triggered it. The pod's surface crackled, emitting a localized field that bent sensor waves around them. A human twist on stealth tech the Council had never anticipated. Mira mirrored the hack, her pod fading from scans. Elias held steady, drawing fire. The interceptors unleashed a barrage, plasma streaking through the gas. Elias dodged, but a shot winged him, venting fuel in a bright trail. Go! I'll buy the window. Harlan pushed forward, towing Mira. The relay beacon loomed, a coalition outpost pulsing in the distance. The field held just screens showing the pursuers veering off, confused by empty space. They docked hard, clamps locking with a shudder. Harlan hauled Mira through the airlock, Elias limping in behind, pod abandoned to drift. Med teams swarmed, but Harlan waved them off, eyes on the viewport. The nebula churned, swallowing the last interceptor signals. We made it, Mira whispered, bandaged but unbroken. Elias nodded, grim. For now, but they've seen what scraps can do. Harlan watched the nebula's tendrils coil like living smoke, erasing the interceptor's faint echoes from the sensors. The relay beacon hummed beneath them, a fragile hive of coalition tech jury-rigged with human patches, wires snaking across panels like veins, pulsing with the makeshift power core they'd jury-rigged from the pod's scraps. Mira leaned against the console, her fingers tracing the bandages on her arm, eyes sharp despite the pain-etching lines around them. Elias, status on the outer hull? Harlan barked, his voice steady but laced with the grit of too many close calls. The engineer grunted from the access panel, tools clinking as he sealed a breach. Holding, but that wing shot Elias took? It's a ghost in the machine now. Fuel's gone, and those bastards know our vector. Council won't let this slide. They've got eyes on every jump point from here to the core. Mira straightened, her cautious nature kicking in as she scanned the hollow display. The nebula's interference painted false shadows, but one blip persisted. A coalition cruiser, heavy and unyielding, cutting through the gas like a blade. They're not veering off. That's not pursuit. That's blockade. If we transmit the data we pulled from their relay, proof of the sabotage, it'll expose the whole rotten council. But if they jam us... Harlan's jaw tightened, his brave streak flaring as he slammed a fist on the console. Then we don't transmit. We deliver it in person. Elias, can you hotwire the beacon's drive? Make it look like a standard resupply run to the nearest neutral station? Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his limp forgotten in the surge of focus. Risky. The core's unstable, one surge and we vent atmosphere. But yeah, with Mira's overrides... He trailed off, glancing at her. She nodded, witty spark cutting through the tension. Overrides I lifted from their own playbook. Irony's a human specialty. Her fingers flew across the keys, interweaving code that twisted the beacon's signature into something innocuous. A merchant hauler, not a rogue pod limping home. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing as the cruiser's scan pierced the nebula's veil. Incoming hail, the AI droned, voice flat against the rising whine of engines spooling up. Harlan hit accept, the viewport filling with the stern face of Admiral Krell, his scaled features twisting in coalition arrogance. Human vessel, you trespass in restricted space. Power down and prepare for boarding. The Council demands your logs. Harlan leaned into the pickup, his grin defiant, all grit and no surrender. Logs? Admiral, you mean the ones showing how your precious council doctored the peace accords? The ones that starved our colonies while you feasted on the trade routes? He nodded to Mira, who cued the data burst. Not a full transmit, but a teaser packet, enough to sow doubt across open channels. Krell's eyes narrowed, but before he could retort, Elias triggered the hotwire. The beacon shuddered, drive kicking in with a roar that rattled loose panels. Fuel lines hissed, sparks flying as the improvised core overheated. But they surged forward, the nebula parting like a curtain. They're firing! Mira shouted, yanking Harlan down as plasma lanced past, scorching the viewport's edge. Elias braced against the bulkhead, rerouting power on the fly. Diverting O to shield, hold her steady. The cruiser loomed, guns blazing, but the human hack worked its magic. Sensors lied, painting their path as a ghost trail veering into the gas giant's shadow. Krell's voice crackled over the comms, fury breaking through. You primitives think you can hide? The Council will hunt you to the void's end. Harlan laughed, short and fierce, as they slipped the noose. Hunt all you want, Admiral. We've got the truth now. And it's spreading faster than your lies. The beacon station receded, a speck against the churning clouds. But the core's strain showed. A hairline crack spiderwebbed the hull, atmosphere whistling faintly. Mira patched it with a sealant gun, her hand steady. We lost the pod, half our fuel, and Elias's limps permanent. Costly run. Elias chuckled wryly, stowing his tools. Worth it. Council's scrambling already. That packet's bouncing off every relay. They can't bury this. Harlan stared out at the stars emerging beyond the nebula, the weight of survival settling like an old friend. The data core thrummed in his pocket, encrypted and intact, bound for Earth's envoys. No grand speeches, just the quiet burn of triumph earned in the dark. Humanity's spark had ignited the fuse. The Council would burn,